Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. I'll see you in the morning, Mom. Misty Morse never spoke to her mother again after making that unfulfilled promise. What would motivate someone to take such action? How will Misty Morse never spoke to her mother again? Now is the time to start looking for answers. On April 10, 1978, Misty April Morse was born in Springfield, Ohio. When her family finally relocated to Indian Harbor Beach, Florida, it was a significant turning point in her life and gave her the opportunity to develop and discover new interests. Misty had an exciting and adventurous childhood in the Sunshine State, but when her parents divorced in 1996, her life took a dramatic turn. Misty and her mother, Linda, moved to a new house in Brevard County following the divorce. She stayed close to her father in spite of the change. Misty found work at a number of local bars and clubs during her late teens and early 20s, working a variety of jobs to make ends meet. After some time, she made the decision to continue her education and enrolled in a nearby college. Misty was characterized by friends as an adventurous, carefree young lady who never took life too seriously. When Misty got home from work early on July 22, 2000, she started preparing for a night out with a friend. Linda, her mother, was also up, getting ready for her 3 a.m. shift. Misty got a few brief phone calls while she was chatting with her mother. Misty promised to see her in the morning, as she said goodbye after the call. She had no idea that this would be her final farewell. Misty wasn't home the following morning when her mother got home. At first, she didn't give it much thought, assuming Misty must have spent the night at a friend's house. Misty had not returned or gotten in touch after another day. Her mother started calling Misty a lot out of concern. Misty rarely checked in, especially if she was going to be gone for a day or two. Fearing that no one had seen or spoken to her, her mother contacted Misty's friends and then her father. The more days went by, the more she worried. A retired judge went for a peaceful walk on July 24, 2000, to see how his boat, which was moored in the lagoon behind his house, was doing. He had no idea that a somber discovery would soon upend this serene moment. He was walking along the wooden dock when he noticed an odd object floating in the water below. His eyes widened in surprise as he leaned in to get a better look. When he followed the strong odor to the edge of his property, he initially believed he had discovered a dead manatee that had washed up in his backyard. Then, to his surprise, he soon discovered that it was a young woman's body. The man, appalled, hurried back to his home, picked up his phone, and dialed 911 telephone. Upon their prompt arrival, Brevard County Sheriff's Office officers immediately began their investigation. They observed that the body was in a highly decomposed state, indicating that the woman had been dead for a number of days. Her death was clearly not a coincidence. A marine rope was used to tie her hands and feet, with elaborate knots holding her wrists to her ankles, and white duct tape was used to firmly bind her mouth, eyes, and neck. Rolls of spline, a rubbery black substance, held the Publix plastic grocery bags strapped around her body. To sink the body, investigators thought these bags might have been weighted with sand or rocks. Due to the body's decomposition, detectives were unable to find any clues along the shoreline, including a wallet, phone, or purse that could be used to identify her. Medical examiners suspected asphyxiation but were unable to determine the cause of death. After that, investigators looked for any recent missing persons reports that might be related to the unnamed woman, but they were unable to find anything. The police had not yet been notified of Misty's disappearance. Finally, they attempted fingerprinting. She was eventually identified through the database after forensic specialists used a technique known as degloving to lift fingerprints despite the skin's deterioration. Officers called Misty's mother, Linda, to break the terrible news after verifying the identity of the body. The harsh reality of her daughter's fate completely broke Linda's heart. Her voice trembled and broke into screams of anguish as she called a family friend, her grief echoing in every word. Investigators later showed up at Linda's house to conduct an interview. She tried her best to relive those last moments, now permanently altered by loss, as she described the events of the last night she saw Misty, her voice laden with grief. Although Misty had not disclosed her intended date for the evening, Linda saw her daughter's casual attire and deduced that Misty was probably meeting someone with whom she was totally at ease and with whom she didn't feel the need to impress. Linda remembered that early on July 20, Misty got 2 calls, Investigators quickly subpoenaed Misty's phone records just before she left, but in 2000, it could take weeks to get such information back. They continued interviewing Misty's closest friends and co-workers in the interim. Brought up the possibility that Misty was pregnant, which investigators couldn't ignore as a possible lead. Was her pregnancy a contributing factor? Linda also provided some names to the authorities, including Teddy Underwood, Misty's boyfriend. Investigators questioned whether Teddy might have reacted negatively to the news of Misty's potential pregnancy, given that they had only been dating for 2 months at the time. When Teddy was brought in for interrogation, it soon became clear that he didn't think their relationship was serious. Additionally, he stated that he was unsure if Misty was pregnant. He gave an alibi for the early hours of July 20 by claiming to be at work, which investigators subsequently verified, exonerating him from suspicion. The intricate knots that bound Misty's body caught the attention of detectives as they combed through the crime scene's evidence. This degree of specificity implied that the murderer may have had knot-tying experience, which made them think about careers as a Coast Guard member, a boat captain, or a person with Navy training. They hoped that this clue would bring them one step closer to the truth. Misty's hands and legs were tied with a rope that featured a cow-hitched knot, which isn't something that most people are familiar with. Investigators focused on the numerous layers of tape that were wrapped around the victim's hands, limbs, and face. She had a hat on. Her freedom of movement was limited. The head had tape wrapped around it. She was under control. She was tied up and bound. Despite having the appearance of duct tape, this tape was unique because it was white instead of the usual metallic gray. Because white duct tape was so uncommon at the time, the authorities were more interested. Their hopes were dashed when no trace evidence, such as DNA or fingerprints, turned up on the tape's adhesive. Another dead end, it seemed. They then discovered a few short black hairs adhered to the tape, almost by accident. Given that the victim's hair was a distinctive shade of brown with a hint of red, the detectives knew these couldn't be hers. This finding raised the possibility that the hairs belonged to the murderer. All of the evidence was sent for testing after the crime scene was carefully examined. Unfortunately, this lead could not be fully pursued in 2000 due to the lack of precise DNA analysis technology. As they met with the medical examiner the following day to discuss the autopsy results, their frustration increased. The body had been submerged for less than 72 hours, according to the examiner's report. However, it was impossible to determine the precise cause of death due to exposure to the weather. There were no visible signs of trauma, no broken bones, and no gunshot wounds. Detectives were left with two terrifying options. Either the victim had been thrown into the water while still alive, or the tape covering her mouth and nose had strangled or suffocated her. In an effort to reduce the number of suspects on their list, investigators continued to interview people. Linda recommended that they investigate Bobby Cooper, whom Misty had recently met at a house party. Given that Bobby had visited their house only a few days prior to Misty's passing, Linda was especially wary of him. Bobby, though, was promptly disqualified as a suspect. He didn't match the murderer's description. He didn't own a boat, he hadn't been in the military, and he had no criminal history. Bobby's interview, however, proved to be a pivotal moment in the investigation. Brent Huck, Misty's ex-boyfriend, gave the detectives a name that appeared to fit the profile they were looking for, even though he wasn't the murderer. Investigators tracked down Brent Huck, who resided on South Merritt Island, just south of the location where Misty's body was found. After receiving a tip from Bobby Cooper, Brent accepted their invitation to participate in an interview. Brent disclosed in the interview that he was a charter boat captain and that he was from a wealthy family. He also acknowledged having been a member of the Navy SEALs. Brent acknowledged that he had kept up his relationship with Misty after their breakup, even though he was now in a new one. Brent admitted that he was the likely father of Misty and that he had spoken to her the night before she vanished in the early hours of July 20, 2000. He also acknowledged that he knew she was pregnant. Brent was a prime suspect because of his background as a former Navy SEAL and charter boat captain, his relationship with Misty, and his contemptuous demeanor during the interview. After that, Brent gave the authorities permission to search his house. When investigators arrived, they saw a Rottweiler with short black hair that matched the duct tape that was used to bind Misty. According to Brent, Misty gave him the dog as a gift. A roll of rubber spline, which is usually used to weatherproof windows, was found during their search, an odd item for a home. Red flags were raised by this and other items discovered in Brent's bedroom and kitchen that matched evidence from the crime scene, such as white duct tape and Publix bags. Outside, Brent gave officers permission to search a boat he claimed was his, which was anchored in the nearby waterway. They discovered matted hair next to a fishing rod holder and 2 hair strands on the floor. The boat's ropes were identical to the kind that were used to restrain Misty. When investigators questioned Brent after gathering the evidence, he said something startling. There couldn't be an explanation for a woman tied up and thrown in the river. He was further implicated by this statement, which disclosed knowledge of information that had not yet been made public. The state attorney was reluctant to file charges because, in his opinion, the circumstantial evidence was not strong enough. He maintained that commonplace supplies like rubber spline, rope, and duct tape could be found anywhere, and that Misty's hair on the boat might just indicate that she had paid Brent a visit. Both the investigators and Misty's family were extremely frustrated by this setback. Authorities persisted in their investigation in the hopes of a break, unfazed. Pet DNA became admissible in court in 2002 after a landmark decision in a California case. The black dog hair discovered on the duct tape was compared to Brent's dog's DNA by investigators, and the results verified that they were a match. The state attorney's office decided to move forward with the prosecution after receiving this crucial piece of evidence along with the mounting circumstantial evidence. Brent Huck was taken into custody and accused of killing Misty Morse on October 23, 2002. Prosecutors claimed during the trial that Brent killed Misty because he was afraid her pregnancy would jeopardize his new relationship. They described in graphic detail how he used the pretense of reconciliation to entice Misty to her demise. The crucial DNA match from the dog hair discovered at the crime scene was among the strong circumstantial evidence gathered by detectives and presented by the prosecution. It was time to decide Brent's fate after all the arguments and supporting documentation had been presented. Brent Huck was found guilty of first-degree felony murder and felony kidnapping in May 2003. He received 2 consecutive life sentences without the chance of release. He is presently incarcerated at the Apalachicola Correctional Institution in Florida. This decision ensured that Misty's terrible death was not unanswered and gave her family a sense of justice and closure. This case emphasizes how crucial it is to persevere in pursuing justice despite obstacles. It also reminds us how important it is for communities and committed investigators to hold people responsible for their actions. Even though Misty's life was tragically cut short, her story would live on thanks to the pursuit of justice. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The police didn't know they were entering a house of horrors when they started looking into a murder case on February 16, 1981. There was something really strange about the house. The nightmare that started inside those walls, however, would not stay contained. Indeed, it was on the verge of seeping into reality. Although the nation would be shocked by Alan Bono's murder in Connecticut, Arnie Cheyenne Johnson's terrifying allegation of demonic possession would garner the most media attention. Supported by Ed and Lorraine Warren, paranormal investigators, this case was unheard of. But were the demons inside, or the supernatural really to blame? Many believe David was just suffering from a mental illness. The true crime behind the film, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, is presented to you this Halloween. The first illegal killing in Brookfield's history had occurred on the evening of February 16, 1981. With dense woods on either side, Brookfield Police Department Sergeant Gordon Fairchild slowed his patrol car when he saw a man stumbling down the road. The figure looked confused, as if intoxicated, and his appearance suggested a straightforward case of public intoxication. One particular detail, however, would lead to the most contentious case of the decade. Tiny blood droplets were scattered all over the man's clothing. He didn't appear to be in a state to describe the bloodstains or his location. He admitted to the officer that he had a drinking problem and needed assistance. The man was captured by Fairchild, who escorted him back to the cruiser. The sergeant didn't know the man, but that night would be the beginning of the most bizarre case he would ever work on, one that would ultimately rock the foundations of the American legal system. A call came in as he was getting the man settled in the car. 2 miles away, a horrific murder had been attempted. According to reports, the suspect had escaped into the woods. Detective Fairchild knew then that the man they were searching for was Arn Cheyenne Johnson, who was seated next to him. They took him in to question him. Investigating the horrifying murder attempt further, they found that Alan Bono, 40, was lying in a pool of his own blood. A 5-inch knife had stabbed him several times in a gory manner. One of the stab wounds extended from his stomach to the base of his heart, which made the situation worse. The autopsy had completed the case, the fingerprints on the knife had been positively identified, and there were eyewitnesses to the assault. The proof was unquestionable. Investigators were certain that Alan Bono was murdered by Arn Cheyenne Johnson. However, it was the why, the reason for the action, that would transform this otherwise straightforward case into a riddle that defied reason and has sparked debate to this day. Alan, the victim, was still receiving medical attention at a hospital on the day Arne was captured. Arne was told that he would now face murder charges after Alan passed away from his injuries. Arne's unexpected reaction was to take a 25-minute power nap. Police Detective Sergeant John Lucas formally charged him with first-degree murder after reading him his rights when he awoke. Arn's only response during the interrogation was that he had no memory of the murder's time and that he didn't intend to harm anyone. Before the murder, he last recalled being out to lunch with his landlord Alan Bono with his wife Debbie Glatzel, her cousin Mary, and his own sister Wanda Johnson. His memory went blank after that. Debbie, Arn's wife, was called in to answer questions about what happened that day and to fill in the blanks her husband had left. The detectives had no idea that her story would lead to a barrage of the strangest explanations they had ever heard during questioning. She started by giving a description of the deceased, Alan Bono, an Australian who had offered Debbie a job and rented his house to them. For the young couple, he was more of a friend than a landlord or boss. The beginning of that afternoon was pleasant, full of laughter and family, but Alan's attitude changed as he drank too much. In addition to taunting Arn about a sinister past that had been buried but was now resurfacing, he started making offensive comments about the girls. Alan kept pushing Arn's buttons, but there was something about his past that disturbed him, something so sinister. Alan provoked Arn more and more with each taunt until he lost control and got to his feet. But there was a problem. A low, guttural sound escaped Arn's throat as his body tensed and his expression twisted. He was growling, not just angry. It became evident that a physical altercation was unavoidable, despite Wanda, Mary, and Debbie's best efforts to diffuse the mounting tension. Wanda flung herself between the two men, but Arn suddenly produced a knife, and the women watched in horror as what transpired. As though possessed, Arn repeatedly and wildly stabbed Alan until he was lying in a pool of blood. Then Arn suddenly jerked to her feet and fled. Debbie said it wasn't just different from Arn. It wasn't Arn at all. He wasn't acting alone, supposedly. During this strange interrogation, renowned paranormal investigator Lorraine Warren called the Brookfield police station because they believed that an outside force, which they dubbed the Beast, was silently pulling the strings. She was going to say something so out of the ordinary that it would make the case even stranger. It was a malicious demon within Arn, she thought, and he was innocent. Despite the fact that the detectives clearly didn't believe her, she persisted and requested that they look over their earlier records. The police were astounded by what they saw when they examined the documents from a few months prior. Lorraine had called, and she had already told the detectives that a murder like this one was bound to happen. Neither Ed Warren nor Lorraine Warren had attained their later prominence at this point. However, it was becoming evident that Debbie and Arne had a strong ally in the Warrens, who were willing to support their bizarre allegations with their contentious knowledge, if they were lying to get away with murder. If there was a demon, why would it attack Alan? How could he have caused such a violent reaction? The demon that lived in Arn allegedly took control and showed Alan where he belonged because Alan had constantly made fun of and taunted him. Lorraine implied that the demon had a purpose, and was connected to something much more profound than just a random force. She claimed that the solution was found in the troubled past of Debbie's family, which included not only the Warrens, but also her brother David Glatzel, who was 11 years old. The clock was running out as the investigators got ready to delve into this sinister past, and the story was only going to get stranger by the second. The realities that awaited them were more horrifying than their worst fears. It started in Bridgeport, Connecticut, during the summer of 1980. Arn and young Debbie were searching for rental properties to move in together after becoming engaged. At that point, they discovered a house close to a well. They made the decision to move in since the house was roomy and better than others in their price range. Debbie's family provided assistance with the move. However, their idyllic reality would soon be shattered by the dream home. David, Debbie's younger brother, had been asked to sweep the master bedroom, but after a while she discovered him outside in the yard, clearly shaken. He insisted on going home without cleaning the room. Debbie gave the assignment to her older brother Alan after realizing something was amiss. However, Alan also felt uneasy shortly after beginning and promptly requested to leave. During dinner at their mother's house that evening, David and Alan both related disturbing tales about what had happened to them that day. These tales would soon be woven into something much darker. David said a man shoved him back onto the bed and threatened to hurt him and his family. Alan said he had had a similar experience. The door suddenly slammed shut in his face as he felt a ghostly presence watching him. The family believed in the supernatural and was very religious. They were therefore certain that the house was haunted. They started looking for other options after giving up the rental property. The family's encounters with the paranormal did not end there, though. David started exhibiting alarming symptoms of an unidentified cause right away. He frequently communicated the beast's messages to the family because he thought he could hear it in his ears. He thought the beast had come through the storage beneath the house and was at their door one day. Each of these incidents then added to the others, and the family was unable to turn back. David claimed to have had the impression that someone was following or watching him. He was terrified and unable to sleep as a result of his intense nightmares, which were full of images of hideous people. Family members started to see David's distress firsthand. Some reported that he would speak in deep, strange voices or show unusual strength. David's family sought assistance from famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren after realizing how serious the situation was. Famous for their work on a number of haunting cases, the Warrens thought David was under demonic possession. They documented the strange events through a series of investigations and interviews with the Glatzel family. David reportedly had violent outbursts during one particularly intense session, claiming that a malevolent entity was torturing him. The Warrens thought that this ghost had taken hold of David and was attacking him physically and mentally. The Warrens and a number of priests performed several exorcisms at the Glatzel residence in an effort to rid David of the alleged demon. David frequently screamed, convulsed, and displayed strange behaviors during the rituals, making these sessions tense and frightening. The Warrens claimed that David's suffering was so intense that he would physically attack family members and anyone else who was around when the exorcisms were taking place. During these sessions, the exorcists claimed to have seen odd things like moving objects, cold spots in the room, and a sense of an oppressive presence. David claimed to have overheard voices mocking him during this period, claiming that he was helpless and would never be able to escape its hold. The young child suffered a severe psychological injury, becoming scared and perplexed, and frequently doubting his own reality. Following months of suffering and several unsuccessful attempts, a team of priests, assisted by Ed and Lorraine Warren, performed David Glatzel's last exorcism. Among the rituals carried out, this exorcism is frequently characterized as the most severe and hazardous. David's behavior peaked in a terrifying way during the session. It was reported that his voice sounded unnaturally guttural. "You are repulsed by Jesus," the priests chanted, "Leave this child alone." Those involved claimed that David had demonstrated supernatural strength well beyond his physical capabilities and had levitated off his bed. Following what felt like hours of fervent spiritual struggle, David's condition abruptly changed. His body, which had been stiff and tense during the exorcism, began to loosen up. David was calm for the first time in months as his screams stopped. The priests and the Warrens thought that the demon had finally been expelled at this point. David didn't display the violent and unpredictable behavior he had previously displayed. Instead, he looked tired but lucid. Witnesses to his ordeal, his family described the moment as a relief, a weight being taken off their lives and their home. Nevertheless, although the exorcism was terminated, the demon continued to exist. Everything would be completely upended at this point. Here, the startling link between Arn and the eerie case of demonic possession started to emerge, exposing facts that nobody could have predicted. Ed and Lorraine Warren, as well as the Glatzel family, said that Arn had grown impatient with the demon's seeming control over David. During one of the exorcism sessions, Arn confronted the entity thought to be torturing David in a show of defiance and concern. He yelled at the demon, demanding that it abandon David and take possession of him instead. They said, "Take me on," Arn said. "If you're so strong, leave David alone and come into me." These words were meant to be a taunt, challenging the evil force to target him instead of young David. This challenge that Arnie presented to the demon deeply troubled Lorraine. She thought a horrible thing might happen, so she called the Brookfield police to express her fear that something terrible was going to happen. And it did. As events transpired, investigators were certain that Arnie and his followers had a story that was both frightening and humorous, but unquestionably implausible. From the investigators' point of view, the day's events were simple. After consuming excessive amounts of alcohol, Arn and Alan ended up with young girls. Alan's offensive comment about Arn's sister-in-law pushed Arn over the edge, escalating the tension. Under the influence of alcohol and his tumultuous past with the Glatzel family, Arn either lost his mind or used this as an easy excuse to confront Alan physically before leaving. The charges against him were based on this. However, what would Arn's defense entail? Did he have a crime? He would make a plea that would catch the attention of everyone on the planet, not just one of simple guilt. Ed and Lorraine Warren said during the trial, which started in October 1981, "We're going to take the devil to court." Martin Minella, Arn's defense lawyer, claimed that because Arn was under the influence of a demon at the time of the murder, he was not accountable for his actions. Such a defense was employed for the first time in American history. Minella attempted to have the Warrens testify regarding the alleged possession by Johnson and the exorcisms. Additionally, he intended to subpoena the priests who were performing the exorcisms. The defense team maintained that Arnie's actions could only be explained by demonic influence. However, the defense of demonic possession was promptly dismissed by the case's presiding judge, Judge Robert Callahan. Because it was not verifiable by any legal or scientific standards, he decided that such a defense could not be used in court. Supernatural claims are not admissible under the American legal system, which is founded on observable facts and logical reasoning. After the demonic possession defense was rejected, Arn's legal team turned to self-defense. Judge Callahan said, "The courts have dealt with the existence of God. Now they're going to have to deal with the existence of the devil." The next question on the trial was whether Arnie had acted in self-defense during an altercation with Alan Bono while intoxicated. According to testimony given during the trial, Alan started the deadly altercation by grabbing Mary Glatzel, the sister of Arnie's girlfriend, and refusing to let her go. Although the specifics of the altercation were unclear, witnesses stated that Alan had been drinking excessively and had become agitated. Assistant State's Attorney Walter Flanagan led the prosecution's argument that Arn stabbed Alan on purpose. Although the prosecution argued that the murder was the consequence of a heated argument rather than any supernatural influence, Johnson had a history of good behavior and no violent tendencies. The jury deliberated based on the evidence presented in court, despite the case's sensational nature and the initial defense's reliance on the demonic possession argument. On November 24, 1981, the jury found Arn Johnson guilty of first-degree manslaughter. Following 15 hours of deliberation, the jury agreed with the defense's arguments of mitigating circumstances, such as the fight between Arnie and Alan, and rejected the notion that the murder was premeditated or that Johnson had acted with malice aforethought. Due to his good behavior, Arnie was released from prison in 1986 after serving only 5 of the 10 to 20 years that he had been sentenced to. The case has had a long-lasting impact on popular culture, in addition to the legal field. Its status in paranormal lore has been solidified by Ed and Lorraine Warren's involvement with the case. standing by their assertions that Arne Johnson had been influenced by a malevolent force and that the devil was the one who forced him to do it. They continued to write books and give interviews. The case further cemented its place in the history of the paranormal in America when it was dramatized in the popular movie The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, in 2021. As a result, the February 16, 1981 case, which was initially thought to be an open and shut case, has been a source of fascination and wonder for many years, and is still one of the most fascinating cases to be remembered on Halloween. Why did the demon, if it was responsible, attach itself to David in spite of multiple exorcisms, but lay dormant in Arne both before and after the murder? Did Arne get away with the most egregious excuse in criminal history? How did Lorraine Warren alert the Brookfield police prior to the actual murder, if it wasn't paranormal? Those who read this terrifying story are still plagued by these questions. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. A plastic bag was discovered by a woman walking her dog along the shores of Deer Island, which is close to Boston, Massachusetts, on the afternoon of June 25, 2015. Her dog's incessant curiosity led her to a horrifying discovery: the dead body of a child. After she had initially written it off as discarded trash, she was so shocked and scared that she called the police right away. Because of the extreme stage of decomposition, the child's identity remained elusive despite their best efforts. 3 months passed before the child was identified. Who could have committed such a crime in their right mind? As soon as the child's body was discovered on Deer Island, the investigation into her death got underway. Authorities put forth a lot of effort to identify her despite her extreme decomposition. She was found with a zebra print blanket inside the bag, and only a pair of white leggings with a black polka dot design. Early skepticism resulted in fruitless efforts to use cadaver dogs to find more bodies or remains. The body had already started to decompose, making visual identification impossible, and fingerprints could not be collected due to prolonged exposure to water. The race and ethnicity of the child were unknown to the investigators. How her remains got to the scene was unknown. It was unclear if the body had been dumped on the beach or if it had floated in the water from somewhere else, possibly as far away as Canada. Because the body was not sufficiently decomposed, authorities thought the victim had been placed at the scene rather than washing ashore. On July 3, 2015, an autopsy was performed after the child's body was found, but the cause of death was not established. Authorities suspected foul play, but the remains showed no obvious signs of injury. Tests were then performed to look for alcohol, drugs, or toxins that might have contributed to the death. Eventually, it was discovered that the child had Hispanic heritage. According to the description, her hair was 14 inches long, wavy, and brown, indicating that it had been untrimmed for some time. She weighed about 30 pounds and was estimated to be between 3'1" and 3'6". There were no noticeable scars or birthmarks on her body. The blanket was thought to be from Cannon Mills, possibly sold at Kmart, while her clothes, which were estimated to be a size 4T, were made by the Serco company and might have been purchased at Target. There was also an elastic hairband. Despite her unknown status, she didn't show any symptoms of malnutrition and seemed to have had a good life. After earlier attempts to identify the body failed, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children digitally recreated the child's face to help identify her. Adobe Photoshop was used to create the reconstruction, which included stock and mortuary photos to approximate her appearance in life. In an effort to gather more details, flyers with pictures of the child and her possessions were handed out. On July 4, 2015, information about the child's discovery and physical measurements were added to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NamUs. Despite ruling out more than 200 missing persons, no matches were found. No one came forward to identify the victim or take responsibility for the crime, despite a lot of effort. The investigation relied heavily on forensic testing. Although DNA samples were taken from the body's teeth and hair, none of the profiles found in databases of known missing people matched. The University of North Texas received additional samples for more detailed profiling. Despite the lengthy process, it was concluded that she might have traveled to any of the 6 New England states, as well as possibly other places. She could have traveled across the nation, according to tests on her hair and enamel. In an interview, television host John Walsh discussed the case and encouraged viewers who have information to come forward. Authorities received a lot of tips, but many leads did not result in meaningful action. The establishment of a 24-hour hotline and fax hotline allowed people to submit information anonymously, and as a result, submissions came from all over the United States and beyond. The child was identified as Bella Nevaeh Amoroso Bond on September 18, 2015, following 3 exhausting months of ceaseless searching. On August 6, 2012, Joe Amoroso and Rochelle Bond welcomed her into the world. After Laura Springs, Rochelle Bond's neighbor, revealed a connection between Bella and the baby doe, Bella was identified. Michaela Springs, Laura's sister, was worried about Bella's ongoing absence from the home. She confronted Rochelle and Michael McCarthy, her boyfriend, who said the Department of Children and Families, DCF, had taken Bella away. This was later shown to be false, though. On September 17, 2015, Michaela called the police believing baby doe to be Bella. At Rochelle Bond's residence in Dorchester, Massachusetts, a search warrant was carried out. Joe Amoroso, Bella's biological father, had spoken to her over the phone but had never met her. Amoroso expressed skepticism about Rochelle's involvement and conjectured that her boyfriend might have given her heroin to sedate her. But Bella's paternal grandmother doubted the veracity of Rochelle's claims and thought she had a significant role in Bella's demise. Detectives dug deep into Rochelle and Michael's past, all the way back to November 2011 when Bella was conceived, in order to piece together what had happened. Her mother, Rochelle, was heavily involved in the local drug scene, had a strong heroin addiction, and used illicit means to finance her addiction. Joe Amoroso, Rochelle's partner, was also battling addiction in spite of the difficulties. When Joe learned that Rochelle had cheated on him, their relationship soured. He never saw his daughter and vanished before Bella was born. Rochelle was adamant about keeping Bella, even though her addiction had previously cost her custody of her other children. Bella was born at Boston Medical Center on August 6, 2012. Rochelle's determination to be a responsible mother was reinforced when she saw her daughter for the first time. However, allegations of neglect surfaced in spite of her efforts. She found an apartment in the neighboring city of Dorchester and made an effort to give Bella a secure home. Even though Rochelle loved Bella, she battled her addiction, and sometimes her old habits came back. Carelessness was still being reported, which was indicative of Rochelle's ongoing struggle with heroin addiction and how it affected her capacity to look after Bella. As the months went by, Rochelle received calls from the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families in 2012 and 2013 regarding the domestic situation. Feeling the pressure of being a single parent, Rochelle continued to speak with Joe on the phone. Although he re-established contact with the family, he never made it back to see Bella in person. In January 2015, Rochelle started dating Michael McCarthy because she was looking for a partner. Everything appeared to be normal at first, but Michael's behavior quickly began to become unpredictable. He lived with Rochelle and Bella and was obsessed with supernatural subjects. Their relationship rapidly deteriorated as they both became addicted to drugs. When the abuse was reported to the police, nothing was done, and things continued as they were. Rochelle had been lying to them, which is why no one noticed Bella's absence. After visiting their home, she made a false claim that Bella had been taken away by the DCF, saying that the situation was too difficult. People accepted Rochelle's story without question because of the situation. Investigators obtained a search warrant and questioned Rochelle and Michael because of their suspicions and Rochelle's false claims about the DCF removing the child. Eventually, Rochelle admitted to the terrible things that had happened that fateful night. She claimed that Michael had become enraged and had attacked Bella several times because he thought the child was possessed. Rochelle tried CPR on Bella after she passed out, but Michael intimidated her and disposed of the body in the harbor. This supported the investigators' long-held suspicions of foul play in Bella's case. However, Rochelle's participation sparked doubts about her competence. Some inconsistencies, like declaring Bella alive on a benefits form, raised questions about her intentions and degree of participation. On September 18, 2015, Michael and Rochelle were taken into custody. According to medical evidence, Bella may have died from severe abdominal trauma. The chief medical examiner, Dr. Henry Niels, suggested that this trauma might have resulted in cardiac arrest or asphyxiation. When Michael was arrested, he denied knowing about Bella's passing in spite of these facts. Michael McCarthy and Rochelle Bond each gave their own account of what happened during their June 2017 trials. Michael made an effort to place the blame on Rochelle by depicting her as a drug-addicted and careless mother. Rochelle, meanwhile, insisted she was innocent of the crime, but acknowledged that she assisted in disposing of the body under Michael's pressure. Because she kept claiming benefits for Bella after her death, she was also charged with welfare fraud. Although the court tended to accept Rachel's account during her trial, she was still charged with serious crimes, with cadaver dogs proving that a body had been found in the McCarthy home and bruises on the body that matched Rachel's description. The evidence against Michael appeared to be stronger. But there was no concrete proof that Michael was responsible for Bella's passing. Michael's defense team claimed that because Rochelle had allegedly informed him that Bella had been taken away by the state's child welfare agency, he was unaware that she was missing. A complicated web of deceit, abuse, and addiction within Bella's family was exposed by the trials. Michaela Springs' testimony as a crucial witness, meanwhile, highlighted the emotional cost of pursuing justice for Bella. Following the untimely death of Bella Bond, Michael McCarthy was found guilty of second-degree murder on June 28, 2017, and given a life sentence with the possibility of release in 20 years. In the end, Rochelle entered a guilty plea and was given a considerably reduced probationary period. Investigations into Bella's case, however, revealed grave mistakes and misconduct, raising concerns about how the Department of Children and Families handled her case. Prior to McCarthy's sentencing, Bella's biological father, Joe Amoroso, gave a victim impact statement in which he expressed his deep sorrow over the death of his daughter. Although Joe had never met Bella, he stressed the importance of her life and regretted not being able to be her father. The Office of the Child Advocate's investigation found significant mistakes in the child welfare system. Only a formal written warning was given by the agency to the employee who committed the misconduct. Bella Bond's case generated a lot of national attention, as evidenced by the activity on Facebook and Twitter. A funeral home promised funds for a dignified burial with a headstone, and other people offered to pay for her funeral and burial. Joe Amoroso disclosed that Bella would be buried in Winthrop, Massachusetts, with her family by her side, choosing to hold wake services and a public funeral. However, after both of her parents ultimately decided against holding a public funeral, Bella was finally buried in a private ceremony at Winthrop Cemetery on November 28, 2015. Her name and the date of her discovery were engraved on the headstone beneath which she was interred. Later, Bella's mother's Facebook page posted pictures of her. When we consider Bella's story, it becomes evident that her untimely death was caused by her parents' negligence. The acts of Rochelle Bond and Michael McCarthy, both inside and outside of prison, were heinous. Bella's story emphasizes how urgently vulnerable children need to be better protected. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Generally speaking, psychopath is not a recognized diagnosis. Rather, it describes a variety of personality disorders that range in severity from mild to severe. Individuals with these conditions frequently exhibit a pronounced imbalance in their behavior and character. While some feelings and emotions are totally dominant, others are noticeably absent. These people are all characterized by a poor capacity for impulse and emotion control. Today's story perfectly captures the good and pleasant appearance of someone with these qualities, as well as the true nature of their uncontrollable and excessively strong emotional reactions. Young Australian Danielle Finlay Jones was looking for her own happiness when she came across the ideal man online, someone who vowed to love her no matter what. What resulted from this, you will soon learn. On October 20, 1991, Danielle Finlay Jones was born in Cranebrook, Western Sydney. Growing up with her older brother Blake, who had always protected and cared for her, she was the youngest of two siblings. When she was only 4 years old, her parents got divorced. Danielle and Blake remained with their mother Jacqueline following the divorce, and their father was hardly involved in their lives or upbringing. Sports were Danielle's passion from an early age. Although she engaged in multiple activities concurrently, soccer was always her favorite. She joined a neighborhood soccer team when she was a schoolgirl. Since the majority of the girls in her neighborhood preferred dance or gymnastics, she initially had to play with boys. Danielle went on to become the team's captain, win multiple major sporting honors, win the respect of her teammates, and win the admiration of the supporters. She eventually began coaching young teams, and in 2017, she even served as the face of a significant marketing campaign for women's soccer. Danielle studied education and social work at the University of Sydney after graduating from high school. After graduating, she continued to play sports while working as a teacher at a nearby school. By nature, Danielle was a fighter who never gave up and consistently succeeded in her endeavors. She excelled in both fields and was able to build a successful career in both. Danielle was described as bright, well-read, and gregarious by those who knew her. She effortlessly became the life of the party and had a great sense of humor. Danielle cherished fun, dancing, and raucous parties. She was regarded as an endless source of energy and a creative powerhouse. More than her attractive features and toned athletic body, Danielle Finlay Jones was well known for her generosity and readiness to assist those in need. Not surprisingly, she attracted attention, and numerous men attempted to win her love. But Danielle put her work and fitness above her personal life, putting relationships not only on the back burner, but also far behind her athletic and professional goals. Danielle remained in her mother Jacqueline's house even after she became an independent adult. They behaved more like best friends than mother and daughter because they were so close. They were verbally compatible, spent almost all of their free time together, and shared everything, including going to concerts, social gatherings, and even club nights. They never had significant arguments or secrets. Danielle started giving having children serious thought by the time she was in her 30s. Despite having a good job, a stable income, and a wide network of friends, she was still very lonely. She yearned for love and a fulfilling relationship with someone she could fully trust, someone she could spend her days with and grow old with. Danielle had a lot of admirers, but she had no experience in committed relationships. Despite dating and getting lots of attention, she had never considered her boyfriends to be life partners. She didn't hesitate to end the relationship if it ever got in the way of her professional or personal objectives. She was prepared for something more substantial and long-lasting now, though. Danielle regularly engaged with friends and acquaintances on the various social media platforms she actively maintained. Although she got a lot of messages from men who wanted to chat or ask her out, she thought that sincere relationships were more likely to occur on specialized dating sites. On the recommendation of her friends, she made a profile on the well-known app Tinder. Following months of chatting and swiping through various men, Danielle got a message from Ashley Gaddy, a handsome man. He was affable, kind, and charming, and he was 4 years her senior. Ashley proposed that they go on a date in person after a week of texting. Everything went well on their first date. They shared personal stories, laughed, and talked endlessly. They clicked right away and had a lot in common, making it seem like they had known each other for ages. With his warmth and sense of humor, Ashley won Danielle over with his charm and charisma. Danielle was so taken with Ashley after just a few dates that she chose to present him to her mother, Jacqueline, who was equally enchanted, fully approved Ashley, and thought he would make a wonderful husband and eventually a loving father. But it didn't take long for Ashley's actual character to emerge. He was intensely envious and domineering. Danielle was surprisingly unconcerned by this. She actually thought it was flattering. Before, no one had ever attempted to control her or dictate her choices, so this new dynamic felt novel and fascinating to her. Danielle interpreted Ashley's jealousy as an expression of affection and love. She even thought it was flattering. Ashley, however, was attempting to take complete control of her life and social relationships within a month of dating. Danielle did not raise any concerns, in spite of these warning signs. Rather, she chose to play the part of the ideal girlfriend and comply with his actions. Danielle made the shocking decision to ignore the clear indications that Ashley was not who he appeared to be. Ignoring his problematic behavior, she started to seriously plan their future together, even thinking about getting married. Her inexperience in committed relationships most likely contributed significantly to the course of events. Ashley kept up his portrayal of being compassionate and kind, telling Danielle that he had always wanted a family. She was greatly moved by this and became even more trusting of him. But the first person to notice that something was amiss was one of Danielle's closest friends. She observed that Ashley's jealousy occasionally turned into unpredictable actions, giving the impression that he was someone entirely different. However, Danielle ignored her friend's worries because she was too preoccupied with her own feelings. Danielle introduced Ashley to her mother and several close friends during their month-long relationship, but the majority of those in her social circle were only aware of him through her tales. Danielle intended to introduce Ashley to more of her friends at a friendly get-together at a well-known city bar on Saturday, December 17, 2022. The group got together at the bar to enjoy drinks, dancing, and light conversation during the evening. Ashley left a lasting impact. He was gregarious, courteous, and amiable. He and Danielle sat together all evening, frequently holding hands and grinning at each other. There was no sign of any impending conflict, and they appeared to be a happy and loving couple. Since Danielle had never intended to enter into committed long-term relationships, she had never introduced her previous boyfriends to her friends. However, things were different this time. Considering that they had only been dating for a little more than a month, she surprised everyone by presenting Ashley almost like a fiancé. Nevertheless, her friends recognized the significance of this relationship for her. Everything appeared to be going well until someone in the group proposed a game in which everyone would respond at random to daring and thought-provoking questions. People spontaneously came up with original and eccentric questions, and it was all in good fun. Danielle was asked if she had ever had a one-night stand with a stranger when it was her turn. There was silence in the room. Danielle paused, then smiled shyly and confessed that she had, obviously embarrassed. At that point, Ashley's attitude changed significantly. He became hostile and unpredictable, and his face hardened. He grabbed Danielle by the arm, twisted her around, and started shouting at her in front of everyone. Using harsh and derogatory language, he accused her of being careless and immoral. The other guests were taken aback and couldn't tell if Ashley was kidding or taking it seriously. As they observed Danielle, who seemed equally perplexed and taken by surprise, the atmosphere became awkward. Ashley's sudden outburst at her was beyond her comprehension. Ashley asserted that Danielle had denied answering a similar question about brief romantic encounters when he had asked her about it on their first date. Ashley took it personally, because she had now responded differently and in public. He experienced an uncontrollable and intense emotional reaction as a result of her thoughtless response in the playful game. He just blew up with rage, and his condition almost went out of control. Danielle felt bad about what had happened and attempted to defuse the situation, even though Ashley's response was wildly out of proportion. Ashley angrily shoved her away and hurried out of the bar when she tried to make amends. He persisted in the argument even outside, sending her a string of derogatory texts. Danielle expressed regret to her friends for the incident and promised to speak with Ashley in person to try to soothe him. She found him outside and stayed away from him for 15 minutes or so before they went back to the bar together. They resumed their seats with the group as though nothing had occurred. Although the awkward tension among those who had witnessed it persisted, it appeared that the argument had been settled. In an effort to prevent more confrontation, no one brought up the incident again. The group attributed it to stress, alcohol, and anxiety related to meeting new people. Ashley remained composed throughout the rest of the evening, which went by without incident. At midnight, the group started to disperse. Danielle had already made plans to spend the night with Ashley at her friend Taylor's house because she had a long way to go home. Taylor didn't mind because the bar was only a 20-minute drive from his suburban home. Rachel, Taylor's girlfriend, offered to drive them there since she hadn't had any alcohol that evening. On the lower level of his house, Taylor set up a comfortable guest room for Danielle and Ashley. It was a large bedroom with a separate bathroom. It was quiet and comfortable, with a few small windows near the ceiling that let in very little light. Thanking their host for his hospitality, Danielle and Ashley took their seats for the night. The couple appeared to be calm and collected, as if nothing had happened, and the earlier argument had apparently been forgotten. Taylor awoke to odd sounds emanating from the guest room at around 3 a.m. Rachel, his girlfriend, also stirred and gave him a curious look. They heard what sounded like muffled cries and faint thuds. They ignored the sounds and returned to their sleep, assuming the couple had made up and were having a private moment. The house became quiet in a matter of minutes, and they slept peacefully until Taylor and Rachel woke up at 10:30 a.m. Their guests had not yet left the room, which surprised them. The couple chose not to bother them out of respect for their privacy and the assumption that they were getting some rest after the night before. However, as 2 p.m. drew closer, and Taylor went downstairs to see how Danielle and Ashley were doing, since they were still nowhere to be seen. He gently rapped on the door but received no answer. He knocked more loudly after a brief pause, but nothing changed. Taylor cautiously opened the door and took a quick look inside out of concern. It looked like the room was empty at first. There was no bed made. Danielle's shoes were carefully laid out on the floor and her clothes were slung over a chair. But there was something unnerving about the room's strange silence. A blanket on the floor close to the wall caught Taylor's attention as soon as he entered. He could see the outline of a body beneath it. Taylor hurried over and lifted the blanket in panic. Danielle was brutally attacked and strangled, and her lifeless body was found on the floor, naked. Her face had been reduced to a terrible jumble of blood and wounds, so badly deformed that it was nearly unrecognizable. Her body was cold and stiff, and she had no signs of life, as if she had been dead for hours. Ashley was nowhere to be seen, but the guest room's partially open window suggested that he might have gotten away undetected. Taylor told Rachel everything as she fled the room in terror. The couple called the police and emergency services right away because they were frightened and shaken. But for Danielle, it was too late. Only her death could be confirmed by paramedics. They initially determined that she had passed away at around 3 a.m, which coincided with Taylor and Rachel hearing the odd sounds coming from the guest room. They might have been able to save her life if they had checked on her at that time. After Danielle's body was removed for forensic analysis, the horrific severity of her wounds was discovered. She had been severely beaten with bare hands, as evidenced by the multiple wounds she had sustained prior to her death. In addition to having multiple brain hemorrhages and a closed skull fracture from the vicious beating, she also had fractures to her nose, jaw, and cheekbone, as well as several teeth and one eye destroyed. The assailant seemed to have pinned her under his weight to keep her from fleeing, pushed her to the ground, and covered her mouth to silence her screams. Then he pounded his fist repeatedly, methodically hitting her head. Danielle probably passed out at some point, but the attack went on. With unrelenting aggression, the attacker alternated between fists and strikes. Mechanical asphyxiation was identified as Danielle's cause of death. Bare hands had been used to strangle her. Ashley was unquestionably guilty of the crime based on the evidence. He didn't try to hide his identity. He just washed his hands in the restroom after the act, changed into his clothes, and fled through the window, leaving his fingerprints on the frame. Investigators quickly found a witness who reported seeing someone leave Taylor's home at 4:30 in the morning. The neighbor described the man as a white man wearing clothing that matched Ashley's outfit that evening, but she was unable to get a clear picture of his face. Investigators were pursuing the suspect when they contacted Ashley's cell phone provider and acquired a recording of a call he made to his mother shortly after the crime, at around 4 a.m. Ashley was still in the room with Danielle's body when the call came in. His frantic state was evident in the conversation. He kept saying that he had done nothing wrong while sobbing uncontrollably. He claimed to have only found Danielle's body, while Ashley insisted that someone else had entered the room and hurt her. He sounded as though he was making a valiant effort to persuade himself and his mother of this made-up story. Luckily, authorities were able to track Ashley's location because he neglected to turn off his phone after the call. He had apparently tried to hide in a remote mountainous area where he had fled. Eventually, police found him by a precipitous cliff close to a picturesque overlook. Ashley jumped over the safety barrier and clung to the cliff's edge as they got closer, threatening to jump if anyone got too close. Psychologists and negotiators with specialized training were sent to the scene. They tried to reassure Ashley for hours that he had nothing to fear if he was really innocent. Ashley continued to sit on the edge of her seat for almost 12 hours of the negotiations. Officers caught Ashley, who was tired and distracted, as midnight drew near, and they were able to pull him back to safety. Ashley exhibited unpredictable behavior. He cried, screamed, resisted, and made repeated threats to commit suicide. It was impossible to question him in his unstable state. After being transported to a mental health facility, experts stabilized him and determined that he had been in such a heightened emotional state that, had the officers not intervened in time, he probably would have jumped. Ashley was subsequently diagnosed with a number of mental illnesses, including excitable psychopathy, which is characterized by unprovoked violent episodes and abrupt outbursts of rage. The investigators looked into Ashley Gaddy's past after his arrest, but they were appalled by what they found. He had many victims before Danielle. More than 10 women have reported him to the police in the last 2 years alone, alleging physical assaults, attempted harm, and requests for protection from his harassment and stalking. It turned out that Ashley was fatherless, had serious mental health problems from an early age, and was extremely violent toward other people. His own mother and 2 sisters were his first victims. They endured his violent outbursts and physical aggression in silence, without reporting him, because they were afraid of what would happen to their family. Ashley could seem perfectly normal and sensible when he was at ease. However, this facade could be broken by the slightest trigger, revealing what could only be described as a monstrous side. Ashley experienced abrupt and severe fixations during his adolescence, especially in his relationships with women. His attractive appearance and endearing nature made it easy for him to find new romantic partners. However, he soon saw these women as his property after becoming involved. He would become violent if a girlfriend attempted to argue with him. When a partner broke up with her, he would start stalking and attacking her whenever he had the chance. At least 11 women reported Ashley for harassment, assault, and threats of harm between 2015 and 2021. In 4 of these cases, the victims withdrew their statements after the matter was somehow settled amicably, but the other women were able to get restraining orders to prevent him from coming. Ashley brutally attacked and almost strangled one of his girlfriends at the beginning of 2021. Ashley was found guilty after the woman brought the case to court. However, he only had to deal with a fine, community service, and a restraining order that forbade him from getting in touch with the victim. Ashley severely injured another woman in an attack later that summer. She filed a police report accusing him of attempted harm after barely escaping. Ashley was mandated to have a mental health assessment this time. He was given a lenient sentence by the court, which included 3 months in jail and an order to reimburse the victim, even though it was determined that he posed a high risk of reoffending. Ashley targeted a second ex-girlfriend in 2022. He tried to strangle her after she left him by breaking into her room late at night. Her parents were awakened by the woman's scream, and they stepped in, called the police, and prevented her from suffering any more injuries. The court was lenient even in this case, giving Ashley a prison sentence of only 6 months. Only 3.5 months into his sentence, just before he met Danielle Finlay Jones, he was released. The horrific crime committed against Danielle Finlay Jones received a lot of media coverage, with news broadcasts and newspapers both devoting sections to the case. 14 more women came forward to police during the investigation, stating that they had also been harmed by Ashley Gaddy at different times, but had kept quiet out of concern for reprisals. There were notable parallels between their stories. After a few dates, Ashley changed from being a nice and charming guy to a predator who attacked, beat, and tried to strangle them. Interestingly, the offender only ever used his bare hands and never used any weapons. Many of these women testified as victims in court, expressing fear that Ashley would once more get away with little punishment, be freed, and seek retribution against them. Given how frequently the repeat offender had been given light sentences or administrative sanctions for serious offenses, their concerns appeared to be well-founded. Justice might finally catch up to Gaddy this time, it seemed. He was the direct target of overwhelming evidence that he had committed a horrible act. But before the formal sentencing could happen, Ashley was discovered hanging in his jail cell on April 6, 2024. Although it appeared that he had committed suicide, his actions raised suspicions. Ashley was certain that he would be deemed insane and placed in a more comfortable mental health facility rather than a jail cell, because he displayed no remorse for his actions. Given these facts, some believed that Ashley's cellmates may have contributed to his demise, especially since he had allegedly attacked them several times. Danielle's murder devastated her family. Her brother and mother found it difficult to deal with the loss and turned their sorrow into activism. They started advocating for more stringent laws governing dating apps, suggesting background checks that would automatically flag users with significant criminal records. By enabling people to recognize possible dangers before entering into a relationship, they aimed to assist others in avoiding unintentionally running into dangerous people. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. It was a very pleasant evening for the Solis family on Friday, April 20, 2012. Their 6-year-old sister, young Isabel, was present at a baseball game between Rebecca and Sergio's 2 sons. The family went home after the game, which lasted until 10 o'clock. Rebecca braided the girl's hair to save time before work the following morning, when she was scheduled to play baseball. After saying goodnight to his daughter, Sergio departed at 11 o'clock. Isabel frequently slept in her brother's room, even though she had her own bedroom. This night, however, she remained by herself. Becky and the boys soon fell asleep, and Sergio dozed off on the couch as he watched a baseball game that he had previously recorded. The man woke up at 5 and walked slowly to the bedroom. When he went to sleep beside his wife, the house was calm and quiet. Rebecca left for work at the medical center 2 hours later. The woman heard nothing and saw nothing out of the ordinary in the house. She left for work without visiting her daughter's room. Isabel wasn't in her bed when Sergio went to get her up for the game at about 8 in the morning. No one answered when he asked his sons if they had seen their sister. He called for Isabel and searched the house with the boys, but she didn't answer. Then, at the age of 14, Sergio Jr. saw that his sister's room had an open window and that the protective screen was on the ground in the yard. While Rebecca was hurrying home and the sons were desperately looking around the neighborhood for their younger sister, Sergio called his wife. Sergio dialed the emergency number. This was the call that ultimately led to a great deal of controversy and backlash against him. Sergio was remarkably composed throughout the call, despite the fact that people react differently when under stress or panic. In addition to his composure, many found it odd that he announced his daughter's kidnapping right away. The idea of telling his wife to come home even made him laugh. Sergio clarified that he was only attempting to maintain composure so that he could give the police all the information they required. It's interesting to note that Sergio Jr.'s neighbor also dialed 911. He was obviously upset and trembling, unlike his father, but he also said right away that his sister had been abducted and that they would not be able to locate her. Rebecca, who had also been in a state of panic and despair upon arriving at her house, was then given the phone. She was able to provide a detailed account of the attire her daughter was wearing prior to going missing. In fact, the girl's bedroom window had a protective screen on the ground in the yard when the officers arrived. It had a big hole in it, like it had been made with a tool. Soft toys that were always lying in the room beneath the girl's window were now strewn about. Isabel's shoe prints, which were found on the electrical box beneath the family's high fence and on the alley behind the house, were found on the floor next to blood. When he kidnapped the girl, the criminal most likely climbed over it. The police conducted extensive door-to-door searches, dismissing the possibility that the 6-year-old girl had escaped because they thought the case was one of kidnapping. Around 6:30 a.m., Alicia Stardevant, the Solis family's neighbor, reported being awakened by a noise. The girl's room is right across the fence from her bedroom. Alicia claimed to have heard the barking of the Solis family's dogs as well as her own. She heard men's voices outside of them, as if they were coming from her side of the fence rather than the Solis family's house. However, she ignored the fact that it was already becoming light outside and went back to sleep. The men didn't whisper or lower their voices, according to Alicia, and she didn't even consider the possibility that there was a small child present. Only locals were permitted to pass through the checkpoint that the police had set up around the Solis family's home. Since children are typically killed within 100 meters of the scene of the kidnapping, the search initially concentrated on a small area surrounding the house. After that, they interviewed residents and broadened the search area to include multiple apartment complexes. Officers used underwater cameras and sonars to examine the lakes and ponds, the local garbage dump, and the stadium where Isabel's baseball game was scheduled to take place. The Solis family's house was searched by forensic specialists and search dogs, and border guards handed out pictures of Isabel. There is a significant likelihood that children who disappear in Arizona wind up on the Mexican border. Furthermore, 16 criminals who had harmed women and children resided close to the family's residence in 2012. At the time, they were all questioned and turned away. There was a theory that someone had followed the family after spotting Isabel playing with her brothers in the evening and kidnapped the girl from the house at night. Officers followed this lead by looking up the registration numbers of every vehicle in the parking lot. The family's home was close to surveillance cameras, which revealed an exceptionally bustling nightlife. A car belonging to a private security firm pulled up in the alleyway close to the house at 2:36 a.m. 10 minutes later, 2 more cars were spotted in the parking lot. All of a sudden, there were a lot of people walking around the house, some of them curious about the trash cans. A car sped around the corner next to the trash can an hour before the 911 call, but during the 10 hours of filming, the girl did not show up anywhere. However, when the police searched the house, they found something intriguing. Inscriptions were discovered by the officers on Isabel's wardrobe doorframe. Rebecca said she was unaware of the inscriptions, which were written in a child's handwriting and contained phrases like "bad father," "I don't love father," and "bad day." Nevertheless, the police chose to thoroughly question Isabel's family. According to one of the sons, their father got violent, cursed, and struck him twice after drinking. Concerned about the Solis sons, investigators invited Child Protection Services staff because, as it turned out, the agency had been called to the family's residence multiple times. One of the boys left a glass in the detergent while doing the dishes in January 2012. Sergio reprimanded his son for his error and drank water from that glass. The boy told his friends about the incident the following day, and someone's parents called Child Protection Services, despite Rebecca's insistence that they laughed about it. In any case, Sergio willingly left the house in May 2012 at their request, despite Rebecca's assertion that her husband was a great father and that all questions would be addressed when Isabel got home. Sergio was able to return home to his wife and sons after the incident was quickly resolved, but the family was disappointed that the investigation produced no findings. The police kept focusing on them, Sergio in particular, even though they were never named as suspects. "It feels like the investigation never went beyond this house," the man later said. "That is the reason it is so distressing." They therefore engaged private investigator Jerry Snyder to look into Isabel's kidnapping objectively, and he suspected Rebecca's cousin Justin Master Mourinho. Initially, Justin spoke to reporters and conducted interviews as a spokesperson for the family. However, 2 weeks after Isabel vanished, he sent his car to Florida, hired the top attorney, and departed without responding to inquiries from the police or media. The private investigator found such behavior odd. Furthermore, Justin still had the key to the house after living there for a long time with the Solis family. According to one version, Justin might owe someone money because he had previously spent the night in Isabel's room. The criminal would come for him, but instead of Justin, they would find Isabel in the room and take her as leverage, or as ransom. Sebastian Hartsfield, a friend of his, is certain that Master Mourinho made the correct decision and would have left as well if he had the money. The problem is that Justin was fed up with the public's and media's invasive attention. Sebastian claimed that he and Justin spent the night of the kidnapping together. He reluctantly acknowledges that he and Justin smoked and drank all evening because it was April 20, National Cannabis Day. Sebastian is certain that his friend is innocent, even though there was a 6-hour lapse while they were sleeping, and he is unsure of Justin's whereabouts. The police chief stated that the investigator the family had hired had no evidence, but the police were certain of Justin's innocence when they finally questioned him. It is noteworthy that Sergio's daughter was abducted for ransom and that he was also suspected of owing money to criminals. Isabel was at the age when family members most frequently kidnap children. Sergio kissed her goodnight at 11 o'clock, the last person to see her after she was abducted from the house where only her family members were present. He failed the polygraph exam. Furthermore, the dog's nighttime barking serves as an indirect indication that a family member was involved. How could an outsider be aware of the girl's room location, the fact that she wouldn't be sleeping in her brother's bedroom, and the fact that her room would be dog-free? Her bedroom was usually where at least one of them slept, How could the kidnapper have known exactly how to get past the street security cameras? However, aside from suspicion, neither Justin nor Sergio were connected to the crime. Isabel was where? Rewind to the morning of July 23, 2012, when 3 distress calls were received by the rescue service. A young girl called to report that she had been kidnapped. "He's coming," she said, mentioning Isabel's name and identifying the district in which she was located. Before the call ended, the officers searched the designated district but were unable to locate anyone. 2 sisters, ages 9 and 11, lived in the apartment complex where they traced the call. The sisters had just chosen to pull a practical joke. Despite the commotion, the calls were promptly released. However, the city had to pay $4,700 in officers' wages for the search in the district the girls had designated because of their joke. The police made multiple attempts to raise awareness of the case after this incident, such as posting a picture of Isabel's potential appearance years later. However, the case remained unresolved for years in spite of all efforts. Who took Isabel hostage? Was she taken by someone the family didn't know who came in through a window? Did Justin think about kidnapping Isabel in order to demand a ransom because he was in debt, but the kidnapping didn't work out? Are their relatives hiding what happened to her? And was one of her brothers complicit? Or is the biological father of Isabel more knowledgeable than he claims to be? Unexpectedly, the case made a breakthrough on February 8, 2017. Melissa called the FBI and said they should talk to her fiancé, Christopher Clements, regarding Isabel's disappearance. They should speak with him because, allegedly, he might know something about the girl's disappearance. But Melissa was unable to elaborate. It was easy to find Christopher because he was incarcerated on robbery charges. Christopher assured the agents that he was aware of Isabel's location, but he insisted on a bargain in return for information on her whereabouts. In Isabel's case, he demanded complete immunity, the dismissal of his charges, and the return of his seized Acura Honda. He reassured them that only he and a member of the Solis family are aware of the girl's fate. He made hints that Sergio was aware of and complicit in his daughter's kidnapping. Christopher informed them that at a nearby pawn shop, Sergio was observed giving Mexican gold coins to a customer. After an alleged altercation, Isabel was taken to collect the money her father owed for the pilfered coins. Regardless of how much the agents probed him, Christopher stayed away from specifics and spoke in general terms. The man refused to back down, a deal in exchange for information. He achieved his goal. After negotiating, the prosecutor's office dropped the robbery charges and gave the car back. On March 3, 2017, the police and FBI discovered Isabel's remains after the man gave them the location. Rebecca and Sergio Solis had to confront the sobering realization that Isabel had permanently departed. Any hopes they had of a joyful reunion were dashed. Christopher Clements did not, however, get the freedom he had hoped for from the agreement. He was instead taken to the Maricopa County Jail, where he was accused of committing another robbery. Full immunity, which Christopher insisted on in Isabel's case, was not provided by the agreement. Investigators started looking into the man's past in greater detail. He committed first-degree violence when he was 16 years old, beginning his criminal career. Ever since, he had been in trouble on several occasions. The man's ex-wife claimed that Christopher was compelled to sleep in the car until they left, frequently brought girls home from strip clubs, and was obsessed with adult films. He was employed at a shopping mall just 2 kilometers from Isabel's residence when she vanished. Detectives definitely looked into Sergio's relationship to the local pawn shop that Christopher had mentioned. 2 months prior to Isabel's kidnapping, they learned that 21 gold coins had been taken from a woman's home, and they assumed Christopher was the thief. Hours after the theft, he was seen on the security camera entering the pawn shop, delivering the items, and taking the cash. Sergio's involvement or any connection to the case was not implied in the video. Christopher was probably merely researching the charges against Sergio that were reported in the media and speaking with agents in an attempt to discredit the girl's father. A search warrant for the home where Christopher and his fiancée Melissa previously resided was among the many that the police were issued. Investigators discovered a sheet of plywood in one corner of the yard, beneath which was a plastic container filled with ashes and a number of gory finds, such as a faded, lilac child's hooded hoodie and a very young child's school assignment with the name Mercedes on it. She was Isabel Mercedes Solis in full. On Christopher's devices, they also discovered explicit images of girls between the ages of 3 and 13. His computer was searched for Isabel Solis, unsolved cases in Arizona, and child killer acquitted. According to a former acquaintance, Christopher discussed the Isabel case and hinted that there might be evidence in his car's trunk. Thus, its return was essential. The vehicle, a Honda Acura, was reportedly given back to the man in return for details regarding Isabel's location. Although Isabel's cause of death is still unknown, the same acquaintance claims that she was suffocated and that chemicals were poured over her body. The man recalled that Christopher had concealed pictures of the Solis house in a Bible in his room and showed them to him. In addition to obtaining a warrant for this Bible, investigators did discover images of the house. After 2 months, the Tucson police chief declared that they had a suspect, Christopher Clements, 36, who was accused of 2 murders. The problem is that when Christopher told 2 agents on March 3, 2017, where they would find Isabel, he pointed out a crucial marker, a stack of tires that obviously did not appear there in a single day. The agents were immediately alarmed by this instruction, because the police had discovered the body of a teenage girl from Tucson near that same tire pile a few years prior. Maribel Gonzalez was the girl's name. Isabel had been missing for 2 years when a rescue service dispatcher received a terrifying call in June 2014. A woman reported seeing a body by the side of the road. When the police arrived on the scene, they discovered a naked body buried beneath the tire pile, the smell of decay and evidence that someone had been dragged on the ground. The place was a long way from the closest residences. In an attempt to identify the girl, the police sent a picture of the tattoo on her collarbone and a chain with an anchor that she was wearing to the media. In fact, a number of people reported that it was 13-year-old Maribel Gonzalez to the police. According to Maribel's relatives, she was seeing Mariano, a man in his 20s. A month before Maribel vanished, they ended their 3-year relationship. Around 11 or 12 p.m., Mariano told the police she sent him a message. She had a fight with her mother the day she vanished, so she asked him to come get her. He had to get up early for work, so he disregarded her message. She was never seen by him again. Even at night, she enjoyed taking solitary walks, according to her boyfriend. She also enjoyed visiting the mall, which is the same one where Christopher Clements worked and is close to Isabel's house. Because the bodies were discovered close to one another, the police were able to connect these cases. Maribel's DNA and Christopher's DNA were compared, and they matched. 2 years prior to Maribel, Isabella was abducted and murdered. Could Maribel's death have been avoided if the offender had been apprehended following the initial crime? As it turns out, Christopher's name was mentioned multiple times during the investigation, prior to his 2018 conversation with the agents. As is already known, the officers got in touch with everyone who lived close to Isabel and committed sexual offenses, which are violent crimes against women and children. Christopher was one of 16 names on the list. He was classified as a Class 3 offender, which means that he has a very high chance of committing the same crime again. He spoke with the police, but he clearly managed to persuade the officer that he was unrelated to the case. Maybe he had an alibi from his girlfriend. In addition, Isabel's parents requested that anyone who might raise suspicions, such as traders, distributors, advertising agents, unannounced visitors, or unexpected meetings, be remembered after Isabel vanished. Rebecca thought of the man who had shown interest in their red Acura right away. Despite his 2 visits, he never entered the house, and the woman was unaware of his name. It's interesting that during the interrogations, Christopher also brought up that encounter. On February 10, 2017, he told FBI agents this. He claimed that 2 individuals feigned interest in the vehicle. Actually, they had to confirm that Sergio actually resided at that address. Rebecca gave them her phone number and insisted that they speak with her husband Sergio about the possibility of purchasing from him. The men thus verified their desire. Christopher claimed that although he was aware of the visit, he had never gone to the Solis residence. However, he repeatedly used the pronoun we rather than they throughout the conversation, seemingly admitting that one of the men was actually him. With one exception, the woman described only one man who fit Christopher's description and drove the same car as him. Her account of the visit deviates slightly from her husband's account, but otherwise, it is consistent with Rebecca's account. What if this lead had been pursued by the police right away after Isabel vanished? Would they have found Christopher Clements as a result? Investigators think Isabel was not abducted on her own initiative. Christopher's crimes were premeditated. When the woman from whom he had stolen gold coins was not home, he called her house several times. As early as October 2011, he also made a call to the Sellers family residence. Christopher washed his car and changed his phone number the day after the kidnapping. He usually pays about $10.35 to have his car cleaned, but this time he paid $110. However, since phone records connected Christopher to 2 crimes, changing his number did not help. The shoes that Christopher was frequently spotted wearing and even photographed in, but which none of the Solis family wore, matched the footprints discovered at the scene of Isabel's abduction. Investigators also examined images on his devices and discovered a small snapshot. It was a selfie of a man who resembled Clements, sitting in the front seat of a car, and a young girl who was lying on the back seat and looked a lot like Isabel. Rebecca and Sergio saw the picture. The woman acknowledged that the girl looked like Isabel, but the poor quality of the picture prevented her from being certain. When Melissa, his fiancée, saw the picture, she started to shake, despite Christopher's claims that the child in it was his son. The child did not seem like her own. The 1.5-year-old boy with the fair hair did not look like the child in the picture. Rather, it resembled a girl with dark hair who had her hair braided, a style that Isabel's mother had adopted shortly before the abduction. The defense contended that Christopher was not carrying his phone when he made those calls. The footprints were first identified as work boots, and the blood in Isabel's bedroom most likely existed prior to the kidnapping. In order to prevent the prosecutor from presenting evidence for both crimes at once, Christopher's attorneys were successful in their efforts to have the Isabel case and the Maribel case tried separately. But since he had already been convicted of Maribel Gonzalez's murder, this did him little good. He is still awaiting trial for Isabel's abduction. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. One of the most terrifying scenes ever filmed is before you. Actual video of a serial killer on the loose. Because its owner was already being watched by the police, fate stepped in before the murder kit could take another life. From a sunny UK resort to a charming southern Italian town, he left a bloody trail in his wake. The criminal mastermind ridiculed the investigators and misled them by leaving obvious clues close to his victim. The man's bizarre fetish ultimately brought about his terrible demise, but it also motivated him to carry out unspeakably cruel deeds. Far from their busy hometown of Potenza, Italy, the Claps family was getting ready for a relaxing Sunday retreat at a small cottage in Tito on September 12, 1993. Luciano, their 20-year-old son, was with their parents, Antonio and Filomena. Gildo Claps, 24, their oldest son, and Elisa Claps, 16, their youngest daughter, were expected to arrive soon. Together with Elisa's friend Eliana D'Alessio, they were scheduled to arrive in the afternoon. Eliana and Elisa had decided to go to the town center church for a service. The girls then intended to head back to Elisa's house before having lunch at the cottage with the rest of the family. Gildo started to worry when the girls hadn't returned after an hour. His sister would call home if she was going to be late, and she was always on time. Eliana was the one who rang the doorbell. Eliana assumed her friend had already gone home after they parted ways at the church. The fact that Elisa was still missing shocked Eliana. Gildo wandered around the town center, worried, trying to find his sister. Elisa was not in the crowd of people that gathered around the church. The rest of the family returned to Potenza to inquire about the situation after Gildo and Elisa failed to show up by 2 p.m., and they were shocked to learn that the girl had disappeared. Gildo asked Eliana to describe his sister's precise morning movements. Eliana then admitted that she hadn't been entirely truthful. Elisa used the service as a pretext to meet with her friend, 21-year-old Danilo Restivo, a dental technician student, even though they didn't attend. Despite coming from a well-respected family, his father was the director of the local National Library branch. The young man was unpopular and frequently the object of jeering, particularly from girls. Being a good-hearted and sympathetic person, Elisa felt sorry for him, but she made it plain to him that they could not be together. However, he insisted on giving her a gift to celebrate her passing her exams, so she consented to meet him that day. Danilo and Elisa made plans to meet at the church as the service was coming to an end at 11:30 a.m. Eliana unintentionally ran into Angelica, another friend, while she was waiting outside. The girls thought they might have missed Elisa in the crowd, but they didn't see her leave the church. Gildo called Danilo's house and demanded an explanation because he was the last person to see his sister. According to Danilo, they sat at the altar and talked for 15 minutes during their meeting. Restivo stayed behind to pray after Elisa left the church, and that was the last time he saw her. After a few hours, Elisa didn't come home, so her brother Luciano went to see Restivo in person. Danilo's responses showed signs of nervousness and evasiveness. Luciano inquired as to what had happened after noticing a big bandage on his left hand. Restivo described how he cut his hand after tripping at a construction site. "I don't know where the girl is," he repeated. After Elisa's family called the police to report her missing, they asked that Restivo be questioned. However, their request was denied, and they were told to return home and wait for the girl to come back on her own. Gildo went back to the church because he had run out of options, but the door was locked. He made arrangements to enter and conducted another search of the building. He saw another locked door behind the altar, leading to the church's upper floor. When Gildo requested that door be opened as well, he was told that the priest, Father Domenico Sabbia, who had gone to a spa resort for a few days, was the only one with a key. When the police eventually spoke with Danilo 2 days later, after the girl had not returned, he stated that Elisa was unhappy at home and wanted to flee to Naples, but he attempted to talk her out of this plan. According to his version, he remained in the church while she left after their brief conversation. He said he asked her for advice about Paula, another girl he wanted to date, but he didn't mention the gift for Elisa. He returned home after the talk via a construction site where he had been with Paula just days before, where he had cut his hand after falling from an unfinished escalator. Investigators questioned whether Danilo was telling the truth. First of all, his statements were surprisingly accurate. Second, Elisa's desire to flee her devoted family was not supported by any evidence. Lastly, it was unclear how he fell head first from the escalator that was still under construction, only cutting his hand and avoiding breaking his glasses. When the police came to the Restivo's house, they asked to see the clothes their son was wearing that day. But without a warrant, Danilo's father wouldn't cooperate. Persuaded that Restivo was concealing something, the police checked his name in the database before leaving empty-handed. When he attacked other boys while playing with them at the age of 14, it turned out that he had already run afoul of the law. And it wasn't just that. 3 female students who lived close to his home accused him of stalking a few months ago. By calling girls at home and describing their attire, or playing them spooky music from the horror film Profondo Rosso, he obviously enjoyed making them feel afraid. Additionally, investigators learned that Danielo had a very peculiar habit. He enjoyed chopping off random people's hair while they were on public transit. Despite hearing about these incidents, the police were unable to establish Restivo. Meanwhile, word of Elisa Clapp's disappearance spread swiftly across the nation, and pranksters kept calling the family to say they had the girl and she was okay. While some of the messages claimed to have seen the girl in a white Fiat Uno, the police ignored the majority of these calls. The problem is that on that particular day, Elisa's friend Angelica disclosed that Ercilio Gegari, a 20-year-old admirer of hers, was out and about in the city center. Ercilio and his family had just arrived from Albania. Ercilio denied attending the church when he was asked to testify, and he gave the police the names of friends who could verify his alibi. But not only did his friends not believe his account, they also claimed that he was in the city center on the day the girl vanished. Additionally, one witness named Ercilio as the driver of a white Fiat Uno, which is the same model of vehicle that multiple witnesses reported seeing Elisa in on the day of her disappearance. When the police discovered Elisa's diary, which was missing several pages, suspicions of Ercilio's involvement increased. After reconstructing pieces of those pages, forensic specialists found that some words were written in Albanian. Ercilio was questioned again, and each time his account was altered. He once asserted that Danilo Restivo gave him instructions to deny knowing one another. Ercilio was eventually accused of providing false testimony. The police received an anonymous call in December. According to the female caller, she saw Elisa in Rome. Elisa had reportedly been assaulted and coerced into a white Fiat Uno. "Please help her and help me," the voice said toward the end of the call. The recorded call was analyzed and the results were shocking. Eliana was the caller. Because she was known to alter her version of events, investigators had long been suspicious of her statements. She was accused of providing false testimony, just like Ercilio. Detectives eventually concluded that Elisa was dead and that Dandolo was to blame for her disappearance, even though they could not totally rule out the possibility that the girl had fled from home. He might have forced other people she knew to tell lies to the police, but they had nothing to accuse him or any other suspect of, other than false testimony in the absence of a body. However, the Claps family believed that powerful individuals, such as Danilo's father's friends and the priest of the church where she vanished, were defending the reputation of their daughter's murderer, even though all other churches were happy to have a box placed in the building where anyone could anonymously leave a note with information about Elisa. Father Domenico Sabia, in particular, forbade anyone from entering the church's attic. He even made an effort to deny ever knowing Danilo. But this was swiftly refuted when a picture of the two of them together on Danilo's 18th birthday appeared. Danilo Restivo was eventually taken into custody for providing false testimony after all the information was gathered. He received a 20-month prison sentence after being found guilty. Gildo was astounded by the legal system after the trial, questioning how someone could be found guilty of providing false testimony and still not be forced to tell the whole truth. However, Danilo was released after serving half of his sentence. There was nothing else the police could accuse him of. Because Eliana and Ursi allegedly gave false testimony out of fear for their own lives, rather than to muddle the investigation, the judge did not find them guilty of perjury. Numerous rumors surfaced on the second anniversary of Elisa's disappearance in Potenza, including claims that she was being sold by human traffickers, was in the hands of the Sicilian mafia, or had a covert relationship with a priest. People who demanded money in exchange for information about the girl harassed the family on a regular basis. Elisa's family actively promoted public interest in the case in spite of the challenges. They developed a website to offer updates on the investigation as the internet started to gain popularity. An email purportedly written by Elisa appeared on the website on April 23, 1999. She said she was living in Brazil after leaving Potenza. The girl explained that she was unhappy and had to leave forever, but she also begged for forgiveness for hurting her family. "This will be my first and last letter to the family," she added. Filomena fervently hoped her daughter was still alive and well. Her sons weren't persuaded, though. They engaged a private investigator to track down the email's IP address because they knew their sister had left the house without cash or a passport, only to find out it was sent from a Potenza internet cafe rather than Brazil. Danilo Restivo was in the cafe when the email was sent, according to a list of all the patrons that day that the cafe staff had provided. Believing that Danilo had come up with this scheme to persuade them to stop looking for the girl, Elisa's family called the police right away and insisted on questioning him. They were informed, nevertheless, that there was nothing further they could do and that the investigation's active phase was over. 2,000 kilometers north of Potenza is the resort town of Bournemouth, which is situated on Britain's southern coast. For the Barnett family in Bournemouth, Tuesday morning, November 12, 2002, began as any other Tuesday morning. After dropping her children, Caitlin, age 11, and Terry, age 14, off at school, Heather Barnett, 48, came home after 8:30 a.m. As usual, Heather was eager to start working and have her morning tea. She made custom pillowcases, curtains, and other items from home. That day was no different from the many orders she always had. Terry and Caitlin came home from school a few hours later. Their mother was undoubtedly at home because her car was parked in the driveway and the radio was on, so the kids were a little uncomfortable with the unlocked front door. Their mother didn't answer. Caitlin called for her brother after looking in every room but the bathroom. She didn't want to enter for some reason. The kids knocked and got no answer, so they pushed the door, which slowly opened to reveal a horrifying scene. Evidently the victim of a very heinous crime, their mother lay on the floor. After phoning 911, Terry escorted his yelling sister outside to await the arrival of the police and ambulance. The neighbor across the street saw the two agitated kids while they were parking their car. Assuring the kids that they would be safe in their house, they took them inside. When the police arrived, they found no evidence of forced entry and that nothing had been stolen. Shortly after the woman dropped her kids off at school, the actual crime took place. Luminol testing showed that the woman's size 9 shoe prints led from the restroom to her workshop before abruptly vanishing in the center of the space. Before leaving the house, the murderer had obviously changed out of their filthy shoes and put on clean ones they had brought. The fibers found on the woman's body suggested that the offender had gloves on. Every piece of evidence suggested that the crime was well planned. The murderer arrived armed with gloves, a knife, a hammer, and a change of clothes and shoes. One piece of evidence, though, was left behind. A green hand towel that had been stained with Heather's blood was resting on the workshop chair. Only the murderer could have put the towel there, given its location and the fact that it did not belong to the family. Before putting on new clothes, they used it to clean their hands and face of the blood. The hair that was discovered in the woman's hands, however, was the most intriguing piece of evidence. At first, the police thought she had successfully removed a hair from the offender, but forensic examination showed something different. The hair in one hand belonged to Heather, but the hair in the other belonged to another woman, and it had been neatly cut with a sharp tool. Speaking with Caitlin and Terry, the detective discovered that their extra house keys had vanished a week prior to the murder. Although they changed the locks, they had suspicions because their neighbor had just come to get curtains for his girlfriend. The children were consoled by the same neighbor, an Italian man they called Danny. After moving to Britain in May 2002, Danilo Restivo, known to his neighbors as Danny, married Fiona Mozingo, an Italian woman he met online. Their residence was right across the street from Heather Barnett's. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they spoke with Danilo right away, and he quickly told them that he had an alibi for the whole morning. He said he went to classes at a computer center after taking a bus. His statements were fully supported by the police when they looked through his bus ticket and the center's registration log. However, Danilo grudgingly led the detective to the bathroom, where his sneakers were soaking in a bucket of bleach, when an officer came to his house 5 days later to take DNA samples and asked to see the shoes he had on the day of the crime. "I'm cleaning them," he explained. The detective became suspicious of this and seized the shoes. The sneakers did not, however, match the footprints that were discovered in Heather's home. The police had cause to suspect Danilo Restivo, despite the absence of concrete proof, because of his dubious actions when it came to cleaning his sneakers. When they chose to search a database for his name, they discovered something startling. Restivo's name had previously been connected to a criminal investigation. He might have been connected to the disappearance of Elisa Claps, a young Italian girl more than 10 years ago. His alibi for that case was also re-examined by investigators, who discovered that it was not as credible as first believed. He registered at a time that was rather awkwardly changed from 10:28 to 9:28 in the computer center's logbook. Nothing would have stopped him from getting off at the next stop and going back to Heather's house, even though he had a bus ticket with the allotted travel time. Additionally, at 9:24, a man who looked like him was seen on security footage crossing the street close to Heather's residence. Unfortunately, the man could not be precisely identified due to the poor quality of the video. However, Danilo was the main suspect in a case for the second time in his life, but this time, all of the evidence against him was circumstantial. When the detectives called the Potenza police, they learned of Danilo's uncommon fetish of chopping off the hair of unidentified girls. The investigators' conviction that he was involved in the crime was only reinforced by this information. When the police started monitoring Danilo Restivo in April 2004, they soon discovered another questionable behavior. Restivo enjoyed going to a secluded park in Throop, which is close to Bournemouth. There he would hide behind bushes and watch girls walking their dogs or jogging. Wearing 2 sets of clothes, waterproof pants, gloves, sunglasses, and a hooded sweatshirt that covered his face, he was in the park on May 12 despite the nearly summery weather. The police were worried that they wouldn't be able to stop another murder because of his suspicious behavior. A number of uniformed officers approached the suspect while posing as investigators of car thefts in the park and requested to examine his possessions in order to conceal the surveillance. Police discovered what they dubbed Restivo's murder kit, which included a big knife, ski mask, gloves, scissors, wet wipes, and trash bags. Remaining composed, Restivo said he had located the knife in the grass and had taken it to protect the kids. He claimed to be gathering insects for his pet lizard when asked what he was doing in the park. He was hiding in the park bushes, and even the police had to concede that it was a reasonable explanation. Once more, the detectives had nothing tangible to present to Danilo. The decision was made to switch strategies and ask for public support. The goal of the investigation was to identify the owner of the hair strands that were discovered in Heather's hand. They contacted the media in Italy and Britain, and since 2002, when Restivo relocated to Bournemouth, they have received a lot of calls from girls who have had their hair cut in incidents involving public transit in Britain. None of the DNA samples that the girls gave matched the hair that was discovered at the scene of the crime. The investigation stalled for a while until the hair strand was re-examined in 2007 using a new technique that could identify the hair's previous residence. It was discovered that the hair belonged to a girl who lived in the UK, but had traveled to Tampa, Florida, a few weeks after visiting Valencia, Spain, 2 months prior to having her hair cut. Motivated by such specific information, the police made another unsuccessful attempt to contact the public. The police worry that the girl might have been a victim of the killer's prior crime, but it's also possible that she was just not paying attention to the news. In spite of this early setback, science ultimately contributed to the case. Since technology had greatly improved by 2009, forensic specialists re-examined the green towel from Heather's home in the hopes of finding something new. This time, the specialists were able to distinguish Heather's blood from someone else's perspiration and skin fragments. An expert said that there was only a 1 in 5,7,000 chance that it was someone else's DNA, even though it couldn't be said with absolute certainty that it was Danilo Restivo's. Blood traces were discovered on the insoles of Restivo's sneakers when they were inspected that year using more advanced methods. This meant that when Restivo put on the shoes, his socks had blood on them. It supported the detective's hypothesis that the offender had brought an extra pair of shoes. Unfortunately, DNA analysis was completely impossible due to the bleach used, thus preventing Danilo and Heather's deaths from being directly linked. Restivo changed his clothes, put on gloves, and used bleach to get rid of bloodstains because he was aware of the evidence he might leave behind. Knowing what might link him to the crime scene, he made every effort to prevent it. He had a plan, was ready, and followed it. Thankfully, Restivo would eventually be charged with Heather's murder, but not before a terrible discovery was made in Italy. Something unexpected occurred in Potenza on March 17, 2010. The local church where Elisa had vanished years before was being repaired by workers. The attic door was no longer locked, and the priest had died 2 years earlier. 2 workers went upstairs, one using a flashlight to light his path while looking for roof damage. At that moment, he caught sight of something concealed behind construction debris in the room's corner. He was horrified to discover that he was staring at a mummified corpse. The girl's watch, glasses, and shoes were discovered on her body and were used to identify her. 17 years after going missing, Elisa Claps was found in the same church. She had died on the day of her disappearance, and her body had been dragged away and hidden, as the forensic examiner later concluded. Her body was found to have evidence of violence. However, several hair strands discovered in her hands, and a few more close to the body, were the most damning pieces of evidence. Professor Vincenzo Pascali in Rome was tasked with analyzing a sample of foreign DNA discovered on the girl's body. But, to put it mildly, he carried out the investigation rather sloppily and had ties to the church where the crime was committed. He said that the DNA did not match Danilo Restivo, but when the investigator decided to confirm this and sent the sample to another lab, it did match Restivo's DNA. The professor was placed on 18 months of work suspension, and on May 19, 2010, Restivo was arrested. The jury found Danilo guilty of Heather's murder on June 30, 2011. Following 5 hours of deliberation, he received a life sentence without the chance of release. But after he prevailed in an appeal on November 21, 2012, the court modified the punishment for Heather's murder and gave him a minimum of 40 years in prison. Restivo was found guilty of Elisa Clap's murder and given a 30-year prison sentence in absentia on November 11, 2011. Investigators believe it is crucial to look into Danilo Restivo's relationship to other unsolved crimes in both Italy and Britain because of his obvious propensity for murder. It is thought that he was most likely involved in the death of a 27-year-old North Korean student studying English in Bournemouth. 2 months prior to Heather's murder, on July 12, 2002, The girl, who went by the name Jung-uk Shin, Loki, was making her way home on foot following an evening spent with friends. She was fatally injured by an unidentified attacker just 3 blocks from Restivo's residence. By yelling at him, Loki was able to repel him, and he even told the medical staff that the assailant was wearing a ski mask. After 3 tries, another man was found guilty of this crime, but his conviction was based only on the testimony of a female informant who had previously made false statements and frequently found herself intoxicated. There were many inconsistencies in her story, and she failed to mention the killer's ski mask. The 2 girls' physical similarities lend credence to the idea that Restivo was involved. Furthermore, the fact that the murder took place on the 12th of the month, as did the killings of Elisa and Heather, as well as the fact that Restivo visited the park where his murder kit was discovered, indicates the importance of this date to him. The length of the knife found in the park with Danilo is the same as the wound on Loki's body. Furthermore, different hair strands were discovered on the sidewalk close to Loki, but it was challenging to pinpoint their exact origin because of the nearby hair salon. From a legal standpoint, Loki's case is over. 2 murders have been formally charged against Danilo Restivo. Investigators are certain that there might be additional victims, though. Elisa's body was meticulously concealed, but Heather's was cruelly displayed for her own kids to see. Experts say that this shows that the criminal changed and that he was unable to stop on his own. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The tragic death of Barbara Faye Villarreal occurred in Garland, Texas, on November 7, 1986. A large kitchen knife was found embedded in her body after she was brutally stabbed and murdered in her own home. There were bloodstains all over the crime scene, which was horrifying and gory. Despite detectives' efforts, the case remained unsolved for almost 40 years. The killer had been hiding in plain sight, leaving a trail of unsolved questions until 2023, when advances in DNA technology revealed the truth. What sinister motives drove Barbara's horrific fate, and who was the mastermind behind it? You'll be amazed at the response. Let's examine the specifics. Garland is a city with a tale of resiliency and hope located in the center of the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. The city was named in honor of Attorney General Augustus H. Garland and was established in 1887 as a result of the merger of Duck Creek and Embry. Garland eventually became Dallas County's 3rd most populated city. However, there were difficulties along the way. The city, which is in Tornado Alley, had one of its worst days in May 1927, when a terrible tornado ripped through the streets, killing 17 people and leaving a path of destruction in its wake. Even though the city was brought to its knees, its spirit was unwavering. A feeling of solidarity and resilience surfaced as the residents of Garland rebuilt their homes and lives. They banded together and helped one another through the difficult times. One family's joy and love served as an example for others. They were so cherished and admired by everyone that nobody could have predicted the heartache that would soon ensue. Everyone was delighted by Barbara's radiant smile. Her family's love was evident and strong, and her presence brightened the space. However, life had other ideas, and this family would soon experience a tragedy that would upend their entire way of life. On December 23, 1958, Barbara Faye Villarreal was born in Peru, Indiana. She was the youngest of her mother's first marriage's 4 children. Barbara suffered a terrible loss when her father died when she was a little child. The family circle grew after her mother remarried and had 2 more children. 12 Mile, a tiny community a few miles north of Peru, Indiana, was where Barbara grew up. She was surrounded by warmth and love there, which helped to mold her into the kind and sympathetic person she is today. Her early years were characterized by adventure, laughter, and a strong sense of familial values. She loved the little things, like swimming in the local lake and riding her bike to her grandparents' corner store to buy candy. Her extended family, which included many cousins with whom she enjoyed sharing recipes and making memories, was always present on Sundays and holidays. At home, Barbara loved spending time with Kami, her faithful Pomeranian friend. As she matured into a young woman, her compassion, warmth, and understanding nature became increasingly apparent. Her heart was always willing to lend a helping hand to others, and her radiant smile could light up any space. Barbara married Domingo Diaz Villarreal on February 25, 1979, and the two of them created a life full of promise, love, and laughter. Barbara had made a name for herself in the accounting division of DeGolyer and McNaughton in Dallas, Texas, by the time she turned 27. She and Domingo settled in Garland, where they were surrounded by friends and neighbors in the 3600 block of Colbath Street. One of them was Barbara's best friend, Lisa Nugent, who loved her for being a kind, considerate, sweet, and wonderful person in general. A feeling of unease descended upon the tiny New Mexico town of Lovington on the evening of November 7, 1986. In stark contrast to the horror taking place inside the Villarreal residence, the sky was a serene shade of pink and orange. Domingo Villarreal was standing at a neighbor's door at 8:52 p.m., his hands shaking, his eyes wide, and his voice trembling. Slightly lucid from shock, he begged for assistance. "There's a problem with Barbara," he managed to say. After the neighbor promptly dialed 911, emergency personnel reached the location in a matter of minutes. The house was illuminated by the flashing lights of the police cars and ambulances that occupied the street. Officers entered and were greeted by a sight that chilled them to the bone. Barbara was brutally stabbed several times, and a large kitchen knife was still embedded in her body as she lay lifeless on the floor. As a brutal reminder of the evil that had killed her, the knife appeared to mock the scene. In his first statement, Domingo claimed that two men had broken into their house, bound him, and pulled Barbara into a different room. He stated that when Barbara's screams shattered the night air, he was in the backyard. She was being held captive by two armed men when he hurried inside. Barbara was led to a different room by one man, and Domingo was able to flee after the other man made him perform a sexual act at gunpoint. The police listened carefully, but every second that went by made them more skeptical. Domingo's face looked emotionless and his story sounded scripted. Fueled by doubts and questions, the investigation got underway. What actually took place that fateful evening? Did Domingo commit the crime or was he a victim? Although paramedics responded quickly, Barbara's injuries were obviously serious. Although it was later discovered that she had been dead for more than an hour prior to their arrival, she was declared dead at 9:50 p.m. The full scope of the horror was disclosed in the medical examiner's report. She had numerous stab wounds all over her body, each of which was a testament to the attacker's violence and rage. An investigation into a homicide was started. For the Garland Police Department, the initial investigation into Barbara Villarreal's murder was a difficult and complicated procedure. It was evident as soon as they got to the crime scene that this case would call for painstaking attention to detail and unwavering resolve. With furniture overturned and personal belongings strewn all over the floor, the house was in a state of chaos that suggested a violent struggle. Several areas had bloodstains, indicating Barbara had put up a valiant fight against her assailant. To record the scene, investigators collected blood samples, removed fingerprints from different surfaces, and took a ton of pictures. A big kitchen knife that was thought to have been used in the murder was sealed as evidence and sent for forensic analysis. Nevertheless, the technology available at the time made it difficult to draw firm conclusions from the evidence. It simply wasn't adding up. Something was missing. Police interviewed a large number of neighbors, friends, and family members in the days after the murder. Barbara was described by close friends and family as a loving, kind person who had no known enemies. Nonetheless, some claimed she had been involved in a few family conflicts, which made police wonder if there might have been a personal motivation for the crime. As investigators continued their investigation, they discovered startling information about the family. Although many saw Barbara and Domingo as a happy couple, others witnessed them fighting regularly and dealing with serious problems. Their relationship was viewed differently by those who knew them. At first, the police thought Domingo might be a murderer. He was exonerated following a rigorous interrogation, but the investigation came to a standstill because Domingo was no longer a suspect. They had no additional suspects, no evidence, and no fresh leads. The investigation stalled, and the police had no idea what to do next. A faint blood trail discovered outside the house was the only hint, but it didn't belong to Barbara or Domingo. Detectives were left wondering who could have committed such a horrible crime, because this enigmatic blood was the only indication that a killer was present. The loss devastated Domingo and Barbara's family. They struggled to find peace, as the graphic picture of her death tormented them. Fearing that anyone could be the victim of such a horrible crime, the community was also rocked. The suffering and uncertainty were exacerbated by the lack of answers. It took a pivotal discovery to reveal the truth about her untimely death, so the case remained a mystery. It was challenging for investigators to make meaningful progress because of the dearth of eyewitnesses and hard evidence. Blood samples provided no useful information, and fingerprints taken from the crime scene did not match anyone in databases that were currently in use. The police were left with a number of unsolved questions and dead ends. The case started to lose steam as the weeks stretched into months. The investigation's initial enthusiasm faded, and it encountered many difficulties. Despite their continued cooperation with the police and their intense desire for answers, Barbara's family's optimism for a speedy resolution started to fade. The case was never entirely dropped, even though there was no progress. Regular reviews were carried out by the Garland Police Department, which went over the evidence again and spoke with important witnesses again. The case was still unresolved, though, and there were no fresh leads or discoveries. 2 years later, in 1988, Domingo lost his life in a shootout in Mexico, bringing tragedy once more. Detectives learned a startling fact after his death. Domingo Villarreal had been using a stolen identity. Fingerprint analysis revealed that his true identity was Jesus Canales. Barbara's parents told police in 1994 that weeks after the murder, Jesus Canales had called them from Mexico and said he had killed one of the victims and was pursuing the other, Liborio Canales of Rodeo, Mexico. Domingo was charged with orchestrating Barbara's murder with the assistance of 2 family members, but because there was insufficient evidence, police were unable to draw any firm conclusions. Detectives also spoke with a neighbor who claimed to have discovered Domingo in her kitchen a month prior to the murder. Later, she realized her kitchen knife was gone. She verified that the missing knife was the same one when detectives showed her a picture of the murder weapon. The Villarreal case became one of many unsolved murders as the years went by. The police department, however, was adamant about solving the case and refused to give up. Public assistance was requested through media appeals. The investigation was given a much-needed boost when a cold case team was brought in to offer new insights and creative expertise. Every tip, no matter how small, was followed by the police department, which worked tirelessly. Over the years, Garland police detectives and the FBI followed up on a number of leads in Mexico and the United States, officials said. However, no noteworthy discoveries were made until 2022. A major development in 2022 was brought about by advances in DNA technology. Detectives were able to re-examine the evidence with new eyes thanks to this creative tool, which gave the investigation new life. Investigators were able to use extensive public genetic databases to find possible relatives of the suspect through investigative genetic genealogy, which blends DNA testing with conventional genealogical research. Detectives could gradually identify the criminal by comparing DNA samples taken from the crime scene with these databases. The potential reward was huge, but the process was time-consuming. Barbara's family and everyone else who had suffered the loss of a loved one to violence had hope because this potent tool had already solved a number of cold cases across the country. Police reopened the Villarreal case in 2022. The case was about to take a drastic turn, and the possibilities seemed endless with the development of DNA technology. Now, investigators could examine small samples, make connections between disparate pieces, and find buried clues. The Garland Police Department used cutting-edge DNA technology to solve the long-standing mystery in 2023, a year filled with revelation. Surprisingly, a DNA sample from the crime scene was matched to Liborio Canales after police retested every sample. Investigative genetic genealogy, which followed Canales' family tree and helped identify him as the suspect, made this discovery possible. An incredible twist came to light after more research. Domingo Villarreal had a brother named Liborio Canales. Even more startling was the fact that Jesus Domingo had never told Barbara or the police that he had a brother. Liborio Canales was taken into custody by the Lovington Police Department on Tuesday, July 18, 2023, without any opposition. On a federal murder warrant, he was arrested and checked into the Lea County Detention Center. It was found by the police that he had left the country 2 days after killing his sister-in-law, Barbara. He had come to the United States from Mexico to celebrate his birthday with his family, not realizing that he was being pursued by police, which is why his arrest was successful. Authorities in New Mexico and the Garland Police Department worked together to make the arrest. Investigators had been following Canales around, and they quickly caught him when he crossed the border. Canales was taken into custody without incident and did not resist arrest. After that, he was taken for additional interrogation and processing. Liborio Canales eventually broke under the strain of interrogation and admitted to the horrible crime that had remained unsolved for almost 40 years. He came clean about the shocking reality of what actually transpired on that fateful day, because the weight of his secrets had become too much to bear. Canales claims that a family argument that had gotten out of hand was the driving force behind Barbara's heinous murder. Even though the specifics of the conflict are still unknown, it is clear that tension had been rising for a while before a tragic altercation. Authorities were able to assemble the evidence and create a compelling case against Canales thanks to his confession. Later, he was accused of killing Barbara. The legal proceedings proceeded swiftly because of his advanced age and the overwhelming evidence against him. Canales would ultimately be held accountable for his deeds, providing Barbara's family with closure and the community with justice. Given the seriousness of the accusations, the judge set Canales' bond at $1 million. After being deported to Texas, Canales was subjected to additional legal proceedings. An important first step toward taking responsibility for his actions was his booking into the Dallas County Jail on August 18. Canales received a 20-year prison sentence after his extradition and booking. This sentence probably means he will be incarcerated for the rest of his life because of his advanced age. After waiting for justice for almost 40 years, Barbara's family felt a sense of closure after the sentencing. The case demonstrated how crucial cold case units are, and how DNA technology can be used to solve even the most difficult cases. It also gave families of other unsolved crimes hope. According to Barbara's mother, the way the Villarreal case was resolved had a big influence on how investigations were conducted. The Barbara Villarreal case serves as an example of the effectiveness of tenacity and creativity in criminal investigations. Through the unwavering efforts of law enforcement and the revolutionary potential of DNA technology, a cold case that appeared destined to go unsolved was turned into a tale of justice. The knowledge gained from this case will continue to direct and motivate those committed to cracking cold cases and providing closure to families as we move forward. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.